I'm Eric Anderson in for Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, San Diegans tell us how the Affordable Care Act is working for them. It's part of our series on the Affordable Care Act, Second Opinion. A helicopter crew swoops into Tierra Santa's Shepherd Canyon today on a rescue mission calling for surgical precision. Up next, we'll tell you how they did.
And California rings in the new year with more than 900 new state laws. I'm Peggy Pico with highlights of a few laws and their impact.
And Balboa Park's California Tower is reopening to the public after 80 years. We'll bring you a glimpse from the top. Good evening and thanks for joining us. The San Diego-based destroyer USS Sampson is being sent to search for a missing Air Asia passenger jet. The plane disappeared in stormy weather off the coast of Indonesia on Sunday. The plane is believed to have crashed in the Java Sea with 162 passengers on board. A winter storm heading for San Diego could drop up to a foot of snow in the East County mountains. The National Weather Service issued a winter storm watch for Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday afternoon. Snow could fall at elevations as low as 2,000 feet. The Weather Service says snow and ice on the roads may cause some major travel problems. This week, KPBS is rebooting our Affordable Care Act series, Second Opinion. The series answered viewer questions about health care insurance. KPBS is revisiting the topic to find out what worked and what didn't during the first year of coverage. KPBS reporter Megan Burks talked to a University City resident who had questions last year about health care for her college-bound daughter.
I sat down with Michelle Heffaker earlier this month. Compared to when I saw her last year, Heffaker was deflated. She and her husband are self-employed and bought a Kaiser plan through the state's insurance exchange. She says it wasn't as affordable as she had hoped.
This time last year, I was about running towards the end of my COBRA coverage with my employer, so I definitely needed another solution going into the new year. I started as soon as the window opened. I was so excited to get signed up. It hasn't been a panacea for me by any stretch, but it's still so much better than anything on the individual market. I mean, I would never want to go back to that. It was horrible, 39% increases year over year. And then, benefits decreasing, premiums going up, and nothing we could do about it. There was no other way to get insurance as two self-employed people. So I still will fight tooth and nail for Obamacare, but we've faced some challenges. For example, I have had to have blood work, nothing critical, but some blood work done, and I just haven't gone because I don't know what it's going to cost. And already the premiums with subsidies even are a stretch on the budget. My son had an accident where he could have gotten stitches or maybe didn't need stitches, and that my choice came down to insurance. And so that's where I see the real problem with still existing with Obamacare, is that the money situation is still so much a part of care. I think of it more in terms of, not to go all JFK, but it's good for the country. And so, yeah, it's not benefiting me as much as I had hoped, but the country needs this. Our population needs health care coverage.
The percentage of uninsured Americans dropped about 25% this year. And there's also good news for the Heffakers. Kaiser was the only provider on Covered California to reduce its rates for 2015. They're dropping 1.4%. But most exchange premiums are set to increase an average of 4.2%.
Megan Burks will have more of Second Opinion tomorrow. Pope Francis is poised to issue an edict next year calling on Catholics to take action on climate change. And a San Diego scientist helped convince the Pope to take up the issue. Scripps Institution of Oceanography scientist Veerabhadran Ramanathan, pictured here with the pontiff, organized a Vatican conclave on the issue back in May. Ramanathan says scientists have carried the torch as far as they can on climate change. He believes now religious leaders need to call for action. San Diego beach cleanup volunteers collected more than 10,000 pounds of trash this year. Some of the largest quantities of trash came from Fiesta Island and Mission Bay. San Diego Coastkeeper says its volunteers picked up 75,000 cigarette butts. The County Surfrider Foundation says cigarettes move with ease through our stormwater systems. They say once the butts find the ocean, they pack a powerful punch of toxins. The peaceful calm of Tierra Santa's Shepherd Canyon was pierced by the sound of a loud Huey helicopter for several hours this morning. The chopper was working with City of San Diego crews to remove nearly 60 fantail palm trees from the bottom of the ecologically fragile canyon. Roberta Froome works with the Friends of Tierra Santa Canyons. She says invasive species like these palm trees can take over a canyon.
They can really cluster closely, and in past years they've gone in mechanically with people cutting the trees and then trying to get them out by truck. This is an operation with amazing surgical precision.
The airlift left a much lighter footprint. The helicopter crew swooped into the canyon and hovered. A 100-foot-long rope was attached to the palm trees that were cut down last weekend. Once the trees were securely attached, the chopper hoisted them out of the canyon and dumped them at a nearby school. Eric Vercoutren works with Black Hawk helicopters. He says the operation looks more dangerous than it is.
There is risk in what we do, but we do this all the time. This is our daily routine, and we're professional in what we do.
The project cost about $35,000 with money coming from several grants. Roberta Froome says getting the palm trees out of the canyon creates room for natural species.
We are trying to do habitat restoration as well as habitat preservation. So we work monthly to remove invasives like eucalyptus and palms, of course.
Froome admits, however, that not everyone was happy with the palm removal project. Some, she says, will miss the lush greenery that the palms offered in the canyon. The last time San Diegans could climb the California Tower above the Museum of Man in Balboa Park, it was 1935. KPBS reporter Angela Carone says that's going to change this week. The iconic tower opens to the public on New Year's Day. It's part of the park's centennial celebration.
It's the most iconic structure in Balboa Park. It's been photographed by thousands. It even shows up in the film classic Citizen Kane. It's called the California Tower, and for the first time in 80 years, San Diegans will be able to climb it. Inside the Museum of Man, there's a stairwell.
So this is where it starts. We're still doing a little construction, but come on, we'll go in.
That's Grant Barrett. He works at the museum. He's going to guide us up the tower, which means climbing stairs. A lot of stairs, 125 to be exact, a total of 7 stories. And the stairs are the only way up. You have to go with a tour guide who will mercifully stop periodically to share some history about the tower, which was built for the 1915 Panama, California exposition.
Got to remember, San Diego had about 35,000 people. This was probably the tallest building. Now, a lot of people looking at the outside, they say, oh, it's a church. It must be a church. It looks just like a church. It has never been a church. But it was designed to look like churches in Mexico, and they themselves were designed to look like churches in Spain.
More stairs, and finally, we reach a metal spiral staircase.
This is the 7th floor, and we're about to go up to the public level, and we're going to go up these spiral staircases, and you'll see why this building was put where it was 100 years ago.
Once on the observation deck, the views are incredible.
To the north and the northeast, we see the Old Globe and their outdoor theater and all their Christmas decorations. It's very beautiful. Just beyond that, we can see the zoo, down into the zoo, including the safari ride, an aviary, and some of the exhibits there. And beyond that, we see the North Park Water Tower, and beyond that, we see the Cuyamaca Mountains.
And to the south, there are views of the shipyards, downtown, and the bay. There's even a hawk's nest on the dome next to the tower. Balboa Park is celebrating a centennial milestone. There's no better way to see the park in all its glory than from the top of its most famous tower. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Now, in case you're wondering, the general adult ticket price for a tour of the California Tower is $22.50. That does, by the way, include admission to the Museum of Man. You know, California rings in the new year with about 900 new state laws. Peggy Pico highlights a few of their laws and how they'll impact San Diego.
From sick leave to cybersecurity and driver's licenses for nearly 1.5 million immigrants in California, my guest, attorney Dan Eaton, joins us with analysis of a handful of new state laws. And Dan, starting January 2nd, more than 1 million immigrants living in California without documentation will be eligible to apply for a driver's license and get one. How are their licenses, or how would these licenses be different than, let's say, ones you and I would get?
Well, two distinctions. One, they're going to be marked with a different code, like DP or something like that, as opposed to the identification that we have. And it'll also say it's not valid for federal purposes. That's going to be the distinction in the license that they get from the one that we get.
And it can't be used that not for federal purposes, meaning they can't, if they're pulled over and they have to show their license, immigration wouldn't be called, right?
Well, that's the idea, that they can't be used for law enforcement purposes and so forth, but the idea that it can't be used for federal purposes means that the undocumented immigrant couldn't use it to get federal benefits. I think that's what they're really talking about. And it's very important that you understand that it will be clear and easy to identify who has these licenses, these special AB60 licenses.
And how do you think this will impact the state? I mean, is the DMV really ready to handle this influx of 1.5 million more people?
Well, you certainly hope so. Now, that's obviously an easy opening for a joke about the DMV, which we shouldn't do, because they really have wonderful information on their website about this. And the bottom line is, as far as the impact on the state, Peggy, is it's going to make our roads safer, because according to findings cited by the legislature, 1 in 5 fatal accidents are the result of unlicensed drivers. And the people who get these licenses will still have to have all of the training and pass all the tests that we have to pass to get a license. And that's going to make the roadways safer.
But it's going to cost some money. How is it going to be paid for?
It is going to cost some money, but the DMV is specifically allowed under the new law to assess a fee to recoup some of those costs.
And that'll go to the people applying for those licenses, correct?
Well, it'll go to the state. That they will have to pay it, but it will go to the state.
Now, San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez actually authored California's new sick leave law that actually, I understand, starts to go into effect in January?
It actually does. The interesting thing is, of course, everybody is focusing on the July 1st date when people can start accruing or earning this new sick leave. But in fact, there are some legal obligations that go into effect on January 1st, including the obligation of all employers to notify their employees of the fact that they have these rights and they can't be retaliated against for exercising those rights.
Who's eligible as far as which employees, and how many sick days will they get?
All employees are eligible. In fact, even employees who don't normally work here in California are eligible as long as they work at least 30 days in the state of California. As far as how many days, people will earn 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. And in fact, the law mandates up to 3 days of paid sick leave or 24 hours of paid sick leave.
I want to talk something that's a little bit more disturbing about this national report on campus sexual assaults this year. We all heard about it. We've heard lots of stories about this. And the new so-called Yes Means Yes law that takes effect in the new year. What is this Yes Means Yes law?
Well, Yes Means Yes, Peggy, will require both parties to sexual activity to show affirmative, conscious, voluntary consent to sexual activity. And by the way, that's ongoing consent that has to be established. In other words, it can be revoked at any time in the course of the sexual activity. So instead of no means no, there has to be an ongoing yes to the sexual activity throughout the whole course of the sexual activity, and silence alone will not do it.
So somebody who's passed out, obviously,
somebody who's
you
passed
can't use that as an excuse.
Or, not to get too graphic, but moaning won't do it, which was actually what Jameis Winston, the Florida State quarterback, said, how he established consent. That's not going to be enough. Yes means yes.
What does this law also mean? It requires California universities to also do something. What does it require?
It does. It requires them to establish a whole bunch of different policies, but it also requires them to do outreach to various community groups that engage in victim assistance and also legal assistance, not just for the accuser, but also to the accused. And as far as the outreach goes, this outreach must be included in new student orientation.
Well, we'll have to wrap on this. The recent Sony Pictures breach was unnerving on so many levels, but once again brings to mind a cybersecurity for consumers. There's a new data breach law on the books. What does that do for us?
It does. It expands the people who have to use reasonable security precautions to include those who actually maintain it, not just those who sell it. So this is very important. And remember, we also had holiday retailer breaches last year. So this is going to be some important protection. And you get free identity theft protection if there is a data breach.
So they have to report it to you. If something happened to my security, the company would have to report it to me.
Got to be reported to you, and they've got to give you 12 months of free identity theft protection.
All right, Attorney Dan Eaton, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
A group of local architecture students pushed to create a temporary park in San Diego's East Village about a year and a half ago. KPBS reporter Claire Tregeser checks in to see how things are going.
It's hard to believe that just 3 months ago, this lot at Park and Market Streets was empty. Now,
we've got the coffee shop up the front there that's just about ready. We're actually hoping to get basically this half of the plaza space, the coffee shop, and the dog park, and get the food trucks and all that in January. And then we're actually hoping to open up the rest of the beer garden in February.
Philip Akatel is the CEO of the design firm RadLab that's building this temporary park. The lot is owned by the city of San Diego, which originally had redevelopment plans for it. But then the economy soured and the lot sat empty. So Akatel and other students from the New School of Architecture and Design asked to lease it from the city and build a park. They won approval from former Mayor Bob Filner. Their idea could have died when he resigned, but it didn't. The students who have now graduated broke ground on the project in October.
In the middle of East Village, you see a lot of high-rises, you see a lot of residential, but not a lot of public parks or a lot of urban parks specifically. So our vision and goal was to create something new, something different, something for the community, and something we could all enjoy.
RadLab leased the lot through July 2016, but hopes to stay in the space longer. Because the park is built on borrowed land, all of its structures need to be easy to disassemble and move. So the buildings are made from shipping containers.
We're going to start being able to line the whole street here with food trucks, which would be pretty awesome. So then when you come down, you've got the option of really whether you want to come to the restaurant, you want to grab beer, you want to just grab something from the food trucks, grab a coffee on the way in. It's going to be a lot of fun.
The park will also host concerts and events and will include a dog run. Akatel says having a space for residents was essential to the design.
It's a community-driven project, and that for us was important, and that's something that we were really stuck to our guns with and made sure it was going to happen.
And it's not just the dog park that's going to happen. The entire space, which RadLab calls the courtyard, will open in February. Claire Tregeser, KPBS News.
As the year comes to a close, KPBS is looking back at some of the stories that helped shape 2014. One of those stories is sexual assaults on college campuses. Universities have been under the microscope for how they handle these kinds of cases. KPBS reporter Angela Carone tells us the story of one woman who went through San Diego State University's judicial process some years ago. Just a warning that viewers may find parts of the story disturbing.
It was after midnight in September 2007 when a 20-year-old woman ran out of what was then the Sigma Pi fraternity house onto the street near SDSU. She was barefoot and crying. She was running from her boyfriend of almost a year. 2 students saw her and called 911.
And then I just kind of collapsed on my knees after I heard them calling 911 because I knew now that the police have been called, there's no going back. There's no more hiding this from people. There's no more hiding it from my friends.
She'd managed to hide how controlling he was, how abusive. But that weekend, the abuse got worse.
So he threw me against the wall, And then he picked me up again and then threw me on the floor, and I landed on my back. And then I looked up at him, and he was reaching for his huge TV, and I knew he was going to throw it on me. So at that point I realized, like, if I don't get out of here, he's going to kill me this time. So I got up and I ran to the street.
When the police arrived, she revealed something else. The night before, she said her boyfriend raped and sodomized her. KPBS agreed to protect her identity because she says she was sexually assaulted. She asked us to call her Jennifer, not her real name. Her boyfriend was arrested within hours but released on bail the next day. That meant he would be back on campus. Jennifer filed a complaint with the school's Title IX office. That launched a process typical on college campuses. There would be an investigation and possibly a hearing. These hearings and how colleges handle them are just one of the reasons over 80 schools are being investigated by the federal government. The results of Jennifer's hearing might look like vindication. She says the process rarely felt like justice. Jennifer ended up dropping out of school that fall semester.
I tried to be on campus, but the worst part of it was not only him being on campus, but his entire fraternity was going out of their way to harass me.
His fraternity brothers taunted her on campus. She says one threatened to hit her. She was able to get a 5-year restraining order against her ex-boyfriend. So why would a guy accused of a violent crime not be charged and waiting to go on trial?
There's a very strong burden of proof in criminal court, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Jessica Pride is a civil attorney. She says cases like this one and many campus sexual assault cases never make it to court.
Most sexual assaults occur with only 2 people in the room. You know, it's a he said, she said.
Which is what the DA's office told Jennifer when they dropped the charges in her case. But the campus judicial process is different. Gail Mendez is an attorney with the local Rape Crisis Center.
There's a different standard of proof, and it's a different process. For a campus to find that the accused is guilty, they only need to find it by a preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not.
Jennifer's hearing took place in this room. Today's hearings happen much the same way. The main people in the room are an SDSU staff member who gets 3 to 4 hours of training each year and presides over the hearing like a judge. There's a Title IX coordinator who investigated the case and kind of acts like a prosecutor. The accused can have an attorney, but Jennifer says she was told she couldn't have one. An armed police officer was also in the room, only because she asked for that to make her feel safe. Without an attorney, Jennifer felt vulnerable.
They kept asking about why I would go back to him the second night if he had raped me the previous night. So as a victim, I had to kind of explain to them that that's how domestic violence works.
Joe Cohn is a policy director at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. He says these hearings aren't fair to the victim or the accused. They're meant to deal with things like cheating on a paper. They're not designed to handle complex felonies.
Especially when they're trying to do this without the benefit of forensics evidence, without the benefit of years of expertise, and without the benefit of the tools that law enforcement professionals and courts bring to bear to sort out fact and fiction. Expecting them to do this well is crazy.
Lee Mintz is SDSU's deputy Title IX coordinator who investigated Jennifer's case. Mintz would only talk generally about the process. She said not to compare what the schools do to the courts. The goal, she said, is different.
If you think of, let's say, a defendant and an attorney, the goal of the attorney is to get their client off of these charges. Our goal is, regardless of what kind of the outcome is, we want the entire process to be educational.
After Jennifer's hearing ended in January, she waited for a decision. She was back at school. Her ex-boyfriend left for an SDSU study abroad program in Spain. He declined to be interviewed for this story. Jennifer was supposed to get the results from the hearing in 15 days. Weeks later, she still hadn't heard.
I would call like once a week asking for a decision. I would email asking what's going on. Why has there not been a decision made?
7 months after she first filed her complaint, Jennifer got a call. Her ex-boyfriend was found guilty and would be expelled. But there was one other thing. Jennifer says Mintz told her she couldn't tell anyone in order to protect the accused's privacy rights.
He's telling all his friends a completely different story than what happened. And I'm not allowed to say, no, look, the school believes me. I went through this hearing and they believed me. They saw all the evidence and they expelled him.
This kind of verbal non-disclosure agreement violates federal guidelines. SDSU did not respond to questions on whether the policy has changed. Even though Jennifer's ex-boyfriend was expelled, he went on to finish his undergrad and get a law degree from George Washington. Just this summer, he sat for the California bar exam in the same room as Jennifer.
Out of the huge room, he ended up in the row right in front of me, directly in front of me.
Today, Jennifer works at a law firm. Her college experiences, both good and bad, have taught her that justice is complicated, slippery even. In a few weeks, the names of those who passed the California bar exam will be made public. Jennifer will learn whether both she and the man who was expelled from college for sexually assaulting her will be able to practice law in the state of California. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
The winter storm headed our way is going to bring rain along the coastal areas tomorrow and Wednesday, with some sun on the first day of 2015. About the same for inland valleys, with a high around 53 degrees on New Year's Eve. There is going to be snow in the mountains at least until Thursday. Low temperatures dipping into the 20s through Thursday. And rain out in the desert as well. High there 51 degrees on Wednesday. You can find the night stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good evening.